Life in the quiet suburbs was supposed to be straightforward for a guy like me. A simple job, a loving wife, and a couple of great kids. My name's Jake and I've been married to Linda for about 15 years. We lived in a cozy two-story house in a family-friendly neighborhood just outside the city. Our two daughters, Sarah and Lizzie, aged 13 and 11, were the center of our world. Linda was a stay-at-home mom, having left her job at a nursery to care for the kids full-time. I worked in logistics, nothing fancy, but it kept us comfortable and allowed Linda to focus on the home. Our house was always filled with the sounds of laughter and love. The girls played in the backyard while Linda tended to her garden, and I would often join them after work for family dinners and weekend barbecues. We were, by all appearances, the perfect family. But as I would soon discover, appearances can be deceiving, and the life I thought I had built was nothing more than a fragile facade ready to crumble at the slightest touch. It all started with subtle changes that I initially brushed off as stress or exhaustion. Linda seemed distant, often lost in her thoughts. She would spend more time on her phone, laughing at messages she never shared with me. Our once lively conversations became stilted, punctuated by awkward silences. When I asked her about it, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand, saying she was just catching up with old friends or engrossed in some online game. The first real pang of suspicion hit me on a random Tuesday evening. Linda was going out to buy some stuff for the home, which struck me as odd since she hated shopping. She'd spent hours getting ready, more than usual, even putting on the lingerie she typically reserved for special occasions. She mentioned she was meeting an old friend from school, a guy named Chris, whom she had reconnected with recently. I didn't think much of it at the time, but something about the way she said his name made me uneasy. As the hours ticked by, I grew more anxious. Linda had been gone for longer than expected, and my calls went unanswered. When she finally came home, she seemed flustered, offering vague explanations about traffic and long lines at the store. She avoided eye contact, and when I pressed her for details about her evening, she became defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and overbearing. That night I lay awake, the seeds of doubt firmly planted in my mind. The next few weeks brought more signs that something was amiss. Linda started working out obsessively, paying extra attention to her appearance. She would leave the house under the pretense of running errands or meeting friends, always coming back with flimsy excuses and evasive answers. Our sex life, once vibrant and fulfilling, dwindled to nothing. Every attempt at intimacy was met with rejection or indifference. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I stumbled upon her phone buzzing with a text from someone named Heartthrob. My heart raced as I glanced at the message. "Miss you tons, babe." I froze, a mix of anger and dread flooding my veins. Who was this Heartthrob? And why was he sending such intimate messages to my wife? Desperate for answers, I started paying closer attention to Linda's behavior. I noticed how she would quickly hide her phone when I entered the room, or how she would step outside to take certain calls. She began to spend more time out of the house, her explanations growing increasingly flimsy. My mind churned with suspicions, but I had no concrete evidence, only a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. The final straw came one night when Linda claimed she was going out with her best friend, Karen. I decided to call Karen to confirm, but her confusion and surprise revealed that she hadn't seen Linda in weeks. My blood boiled with a mixture of rage and fear. What was Linda hiding? And more importantly, with whom was she spending her time? I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The life I thought I had, the loving wife, the perfect family, was slipping through my fingers, and I needed to find out why. Little did I know, the journey I was about to embark on would shatter my world in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I waited for Linda to leave, claiming she had another girls' night planned, and then I went through her phone while she was in the shower. My hands shook as I unlocked it, guilt gnawing at my conscience, but I had to know the truth. I found a series of messages from Heartthrob that confirmed my worst fears. They were explicit, filled with innuendos, and there were even photos, pictures that made my blood boil. The texts detailed secret meetings, intimate moments, and even plans for future rendezvous. It was clear that this had been going on for months. My entire world collapsed in those few minutes, the life I thought I had built with Linda turning into a sick joke. Unable to contain my anger, I decided to follow her. That evening, When she left the house, I was right behind her. I kept a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. She drove across town to a small, out-of-the-way motel. My worst fears were confirmed as I watched her enter a room, greeted by a tall, muscular man who pulled her into a passionate embrace. Rage consumed me. I parked my car and stormed toward the motel room, my fists clenched. As I reached the door, I could hear their muffled voices and laughter inside. Without thinking, I kicked the door open, adrenaline fueling my every move. Linda screamed, scrambling to cover herself. The man, heartthrob, turned, shock registering on his face. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, but I didn't give him a chance to react. I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw. He staggered back, but quickly regained his balance and swung back. We grappled, each punch fueled by my fury and his desperation. I managed to pin him against the wall, my knuckles bruising as I pounded into him. "How could you?" I yelled, my voice a mix of anger and anguish. "How could you do this to me? To our family?" Linda was crying, begging me to stop, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. All I could see was red, the betrayal, the lies, the years of our marriage crumbling before me. The man managed to shove me off him, gasping for breath. "I didn't know she was married," he sputtered, blood trickling from his nose. "She said you were separated." His words only fueled my rage. I lunged again, but this time Linda stepped between us. "Jake, please stop," she sobbed. "This isn't going to solve anything." Her face, tear-streaked and pleading, finally broke through my haze of fury. I released the man, stepping back and trying to catch my breath. The reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. My wife, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I stumbled out of the room, the weight of my discovery crushing me. I drove home in a daze, the fight replaying in my mind, each punch a bitter reminder of my broken life. When I reached the house, I collapsed on the couch, the exhaustion of the confrontation overwhelming me. Linda came home later, her face puffy from crying. She tried to talk to me, but I couldn't bear to look at her. "We'll talk tomorrow," I muttered, turning away. That night I lay awake, my mind racing. I knew the confrontation was far from over. Linda had shattered our life, and I needed to understand why. The discovery of her affair was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. The next morning, the air in the house was thick with tension. Linda had spent the night on the couch, but now she was sitting at the kitchen table, eyes red and puffy, staring blankly at a cup of cold coffee. I knew we had to talk, but I didn't know where to begin. The betrayal was still raw, and the image of her with that man haunted me. I took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched the mug. "I'm so sorry, Jake," she began, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." "Just happened," I repeated, incredulous. "You don't just fall into someone's bed, Linda. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a series of choices." She flinched at my words but didn't look away. "I was lonely, Jake. You were always working, and I felt like I was invisible. Chris made me feel alive again." "Don't you dare try to blame this on me," I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. "I worked to provide for our family. Everything I did was for us. And this is how you repay me?" Linda buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I know. I was selfish. I just wanted to feel something, anything." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "You could have talked to me, Linda. We could have worked through it together. But instead, you chose to betray me, to destroy our family." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, Jake, don't take the girls away from me. They're all I have left." Her words struck a nerve. Sarah and Lizzie. How was I supposed to explain this to them? How could I tell them that their mother had shattered our family? "I don't know what's going to happen," I said finally. "But you need to understand that you've destroyed the trust between us. I can't just forgive and forget." Linda nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Please, just give me a chance." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. The damage was done, and now we had to figure out how to move forward. "We'll see," I said, my voice cold. "But don't think for a second that things will ever go back to the way they were." As the days turned into weeks, Linda tried to prove that she was committed to fixing our marriage. She ended all contact with Chris, and even suggested we go to couples counseling. Part of me wanted to believe that we could repair the broken pieces, but another part of me couldn't shake the image of her with him. The betrayal seared into my mind. One evening, after a particularly tense counseling session, I decided to confront Linda about the lies she had told during our marriage. "Why didn't you just tell me you were unhappy?" I asked, my voice raw with emotion. "Why lie to me for so long?" Linda sighed, looking down at her hands. "I was scared, Jake. Scared that you would leave me, that I would lose everything. I thought if I just kept pretending, it would all work out somehow." "Well, look where that got us," I replied bitterly. "Your lies didn't save our marriage. They destroyed it." Linda reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to try to make it right." I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world. Now she was a stranger, someone who had torn my life apart. "I don't know if that's possible," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The pain in her eyes mirrored my own, and for a moment we were both silent, lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Linda spoke, her voice trembling. "What can I do, Jake? How can I make this right?" I shook my head, unable to give her an answer. "I don't know," I said finally. "I really don't know." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The confrontation had left me more confused and hurt than ever. The road ahead was uncertain, and I had no idea how to navigate it. All I knew was that things could never be the same. The woman I had loved, the life we had built, had been shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces. The realization that Linda had shattered our life made the anger inside me simmer into something darker. I had always been the dependable one, the provider, the one who sacrificed for our family. And now, in the face of her betrayal, I felt a need for retribution, something that would make her feel a fraction of the pain I was enduring. The plan for revenge took shape slowly. I knew it had to be something that would hit her where it hurt the most. Her reputation, her sense of control, her life as she knew it. I spent days plotting, thinking through every detail. It was no longer about salvaging our marriage. It was about making her pay. First, I gathered all the evidence I could find. The explicit texts, the photos, the timestamps of her meetings with Chris. I compiled everything into a neat, damning dossier. With this ammunition, I reached out to her closest friends and family, anonymously sending them the proof of her infidelity. I knew Linda prided herself on the image of a perfect wife and mother, and this would shatter that illusion. Next, I contacted Chris' wife. She deserved to know the truth about her husband. I sent her everything, detailing their affair and the dates. Her shock and pain mirrored my own, and together, we decided to confront them publicly. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, at a neighborhood barbecue Linda had organized, we executed our plan. The backyard was filled with friends and family, everyone enjoying the food and the company. Linda was in her element, laughing and chatting as if nothing was wrong. I waited until the moment was right, then I called for everyone's attention. "I have something important to share," I said, my voice steady but loud enough to cut through the chatter. Linda's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "This is Chris," I continued, pointing to the man who stood next to Linda, his face paling as he realized what was happening. "And this is my wife, Linda. For those of you who think you know them, here's what they've been hiding." I pulled out the dossier and began reading aloud, detailing their affair in explicit detail. Gasps and murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd as I laid bare the extent of their betrayal. Linda's face turned white, then red with anger and embarrassment. She tried to grab the papers from me, but I held firm, reading every sordid detail until there was no doubt left in anyone's mind. Chris' wife stepped forward, her voice trembling with rage. "I trusted you," she spat at her husband. "And you threw it all away for this?" She turned to Linda, her eyes filled with contempt. "How could you do this to your family?" The crowd was in an uproar, people whispering and pointing, their eyes filled with judgment. Linda's facade crumbled, her tears streaming down her face as she tried to plead for understanding. "Please stop," she sobbed. "Jake, please." But I wasn't done. You think this is it, Linda? I said, my voice cold. You think you can just cry and everything will be forgiven? This is just the beginning. I had already taken steps to ensure that Linda would feel the consequences of her actions in every aspect of her life. I contacted the school board where she volunteered, providing them with the evidence of her affair. She was promptly dismissed, her reputation in ruins. I spread the word to our neighbors, ensuring that everyone knew the truth about the woman they thought they knew. But the cruelest part of my revenge was yet to come. I filed for divorce, demanding full custody of Sarah and Lizzie. I knew this would devastate Linda more than anything else. The court battle was fierce, but with the mountain of evidence I had, the judge ruled in my favor. Linda was granted only supervised visitation, her role in our daughters' lives drastically reduced. The day she received the court's decision, she collapsed in tears, begging me to reconsider. "Please, Jake," she cried, "don't take my girls away from me. I'll do anything." I looked at her, the woman who had once been the center of my world, now reduced to a pleading, broken mess. "You did this to yourself, Linda," I said coldly. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Watching her suffer didn't bring me the satisfaction I had imagined. Instead, it left me feeling hollow, the revenge that had driven me now a bitter aftertaste. But there was no turning back. The damage was done, and our lives would never be the same. In the end, Linda moved out of our house, finding a small apartment on the other side of town. She saw the girls twice a month, each visit supervised by a court-appointed guardian. Our interactions were limited to brief, strained conversations about the logistics of shared parenting. I knew I had won the battle, but at what cost? The family I had fought to protect was irrevocably shattered, and the man I had become in the process was a stranger even to myself. Months passed, and the dust of our shattered marriage began to settle. Life took on a new rhythm, one without Linda. She still had supervised visits with Sarah and Lizzie, but our interactions were minimal. The pain of betrayal lingered, but I was slowly learning to navigate my life without the constant weight of her infidelity. One evening, I received an unexpected call from Linda. "Jake, can we talk?" Her voice was shaky, a mix of desperation and resignation. "I need to see you, alone." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby park. When I arrived, I saw her sitting on a bench, looking more fragile and worn than I had ever seen her. She stood up as I approached, and for a moment we simply stared at each other, the silence heavy with unspoken words. "Thank you for coming," she began, her eyes red from crying. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to talk to you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The anger that had fueled my revenge had subsided, leaving a hollow ache in its place. "What do you want, Linda?" She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. "I know I've ruined everything. I know I've hurt you and the girls in ways I can't even begin to make up for. But I need you to know that I'm truly sorry. Not just for the affair, but for everything. For all the lies. For blaming you. For everything." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I felt a pang of the old, familiar pain. But I also felt something else, a faint glimmer of closure. "Linda, I can't forgive you for what you've done," I said, my voice steady. "But I do appreciate your apology. It's just too late." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I regret everything." We stood there in silence, the weight of our past pressing down on us. Finally, she spoke again. "I also wanted to talk about the girls. I know the court's decision was fair, but I miss them so much. I want to be a part of their lives, Jake. I want to try to make things right with them, even if I can't with you." Her plea was sincere, and despite everything, I felt a twinge of compassion. "I'll talk to them," I said finally. "If they want to see more of you, I'll consider it. But it has to be their choice." Linda nodded, relief washing over her face. "Thank you, Jake. That's all I can ask for." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of finality. Our marriage was over, our life together a distant memory, but perhaps now we could begin to heal in our own ways. The path ahead was still uncertain, but at least the shadows of the past were starting to fade. In the months that followed, I threw myself into creating a new life for my daughters and me. The house, once filled with memories of Linda, was slowly transformed. I redecorated, changing the colors and replacing old furniture, creating a space that was entirely ours. It was a therapeutic process, each stroke of paint and every new piece of furniture symbolizing a step toward healing. Sarah and Lizzie adjusted to the new normal with remarkable resilience. We developed new routines, filling our days with laughter and love. We spent weekends exploring new parks, going to the movies, and trying out new recipes in the kitchen. Our bond grew stronger, the scars of the past slowly fading as we built new memories together. I also began to focus on myself. I joined a local gym, reconnecting with an old passion for fitness. The physical activity was a release, a way to channel my emotions into something positive. I made new friends, people who supported me and encouraged me to move forward. One day, while picking up Lizzie from a playdate, I met Erin. She was the mother of one of Lizzie's friends, kind and warm, with a smile that lit up the room. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself drawn to her genuine kindness and strength. Over time, our friendship grew, blossoming into something deeper. Erin was a beacon of light in my life. She understood the pain of betrayal, having gone through a difficult divorce herself. We bonded over shared experiences, supporting each other through the ups and downs. Her presence was a balm to my wounded heart. And slowly, I began to open up to the possibility of love again. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Erin took my hand. "Jake, you're an incredible father and a wonderful man. You've been through so much, but you're still standing. I'm proud of you." Her words touched me deeply, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. "Thank you, Erin," I said, squeezing her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." Our relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Erin became an integral part of our lives, not just as a partner but as a friend to Sarah and Lizzie. They adored her, and seeing them happy brought a joy I hadn't felt in years. As time went on, the pain of the past faded into the background, replaced by the warmth of new beginnings. I realized that life had a way of surprising you, of bringing unexpected blessings even in the darkest times. Looking back, I saw the journey I had traveled, from the depths of betrayal and anger to the heights of healing and love. The experience had changed me, making me stronger and more resilient. I learned to value myself, to recognize my worth, and to embrace the possibility of happiness. Linda remained a part of our lives, her relationship with the girls slowly improving as she worked to rebuild their trust. It was a slow process, but I knew it was important for them to have a relationship with their mother. As for me, I looked to the future with hope. Erin and I continued to build our life together, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of new adventures. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they were a testament to my strength and resilience, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, it was possible to find happiness again. And so, with Erin by my side and my daughters in my heart, I stepped into the future, ready to embrace whatever came next. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also led me to a place of peace and love, a place I could finally call home.